Good evening, everybody. My name is Terry Hawk, and the reason we have this big moving sound is we also are streaming. So as we stream, we want to be sure that those that are watching from home can hear as well. So what we'll talk about this evening are both elementary and middle school boundaries. At the end, we'll have a piece for question and answer. That question and answer will not be streamed. What we will do is have a frequently asked questions. The PowerPoint presentation that you're going to see this evening will be put on the website. It will be PDF. The streaming that we're doing this evening is also recorded, and that recording will go up on the website later, maybe by Friday or early next week as well. So we'll get started with the presentation this evening. We currently have 6 schools. We'll soon have 8. Once you do those things, we're going to move from 4 elementaries to 5. And we're going to move from 1 middle school to 2. Therefore, we have to segment or put boundaries in to determine who's going where. And that's what we're going to do this evening. We have 4 goals in the district that we talked about when we look at determining attendance centers. And as you can see, stability, proximity to school, space, and size of class. There is a disclaimer, so to speak. There is a note on the bottom. It's difficult because of changing information, difficult to look at the demographics of a building. So socioeconomics, ethnics, and yes, friendships. I'm sorry to say that there may be somebody that has a friend here, and a person that has a friend that may be going somewhere else. Those are not part of the 4. This is the current map of Bennington Public Schools with the 4 elementary attendance centers. You can see down at the bottom, the 2 smaller ones geographically are Pine Creek Elementary and Anchor Pointe Attendance Center. Heritage in Bennington and Bennington Elementary takes up more than 50% geographically, but we'll see the numbers as we move forward. We look at capacity, even though we have different numbers in those elementaries today. As you saw in the corner, Bennington Elementary had a little bit under 400. Heritage had over 400. And both Pine Creek and Anchor Pointe were very close to 600, between 580 and 600. Capacity, we look at it in this format. What is a general classroom? One classroom that is typical for kindergarten, 5th grade, 3rd grade. That classroom architecturally is what is told as 25 students. We have an average of 20.8, or right at 21 students per classroom. Now you're saying to yourself, well, that's not true, because I've had classrooms of 25 with my kid, and I've had classrooms of 17. An average of around 21. We look at it for 23. So capacity in a building is 23 students per classroom. Most of our buildings have 21 classrooms, except for 2. Anchor Pointe has 21 general ed K-5 classrooms, but it also has 3 preschool rooms. Denoting that up there. Preschool is half day, therefore 12 in a room. That's why you see 36. Pine Creek, if you were in that attendance center, you know that we added a section or a wing to that, 4 additional rooms. So 21 goes up to 25. So the capacity of Pine Creek is 575. The rest are at 483, and there's a note for Anchor Pointe. We look at neighborhoods, and we determine the growth in the neighborhood. Now, this has 5 different neighborhoods in it. Difficult to see up there, but if you were to look at home, you'll notice that you see Anchor Pointe at the bottom, and I'll tell you those for those in the crowd here. But as you can see, 2008 to recently. And we look at Pine Creek, and we look at Meadow Ridge, and we look at Stratford Park, and Bennington West, and Bennington, what is called Bennington West and Bennington Park. That is everything west of 156th Street. Bennington East, everything east of 156th Street. When we look at those neighborhoods, Pine Creek, I know because our family was the first home in Pine Creek, started in 2004. So there were a few homes in 2008, and then as you can see in 2011, what that means is the 69%, 69 out of 100 homes had an elementary student attending Bennington Public Schools. Or 69% of the homes had an elementary student living and attending Bennington Public Schools. It drops down to 59%. You can see Bennington Park West, around 33, and it's dropped to 21, excuse me, or close to 22. Meadow Ridge has been pretty steady. Stratford Park, very similar to Pine Creek, grew, and it is at the height right now of 56%. And as I look at Anchor Pointe, it started at 37% and has gone up to 59%. Now we use those numbers as we look at attendance, and we try to use those numbers to determine how many students, when every house is built, will be in that attendance center. This is the map of the 5 attendance centers. As you're looking at that, don't have to take a snapshot of it. I'll tell you right now, what we've done in the bottom corner is the Anchor Pointe Attendance Center has been divided in half at State Street. State Street South, State Street North. So Elementary 5 is in the green, Attendance Center for Anchor Pointe is in the yellow. Now keep in mind there are some other yellow blocks in there, but if you look at the map, those are City of Omaha zoning jurisdictions for commercial or industry. So going down Highway 133, we do not have attendance center going to Anchor Pointe. That is zoned differently by the city. So keep in mind what we have down here. Now, if we had the number of students going in there, and if we took every one of those by a percentage, what we would end up with is Anchor Pointe at 506, all the way up to Elementary 9, or Elementary number 5 at 922. Let's show you each map. All right? These are the subdivisions in each attendance center. We're going to start with Bennington Elementary. Bennington Elementary does not change in terms of boundaries or attendance center zones. But we do have some numbers up here. So what you're going to look at, we're going to start right in the middle. We're going to take Newport Landing. Newport Landing in the middle has 270 lots. That's what's in the bracket. We move to the next column, titled homes. Currently, there are 213 homes that are occupied in Newport Landing. The blue is the number of students we have coming out of Newport Landing into Bennington Elementaries. The red is the percentage, 45 into 213. We take that red number, the percentage, take it times the number of lots, 270, and what we project is 57 elementary students. Now, if you look down at the bottom, which you can't see if you're here, we have 398 students currently in Bennington Elementary. If my technician saw that and was frowning at me, so I won't get so close to that TV. If we were to take the population, the red column, by the number of lots, we would come up with 543 elementary students. All right? Now, if you find me 10 years from now and you say, hey, every lot's full and there's 545, all right, you win. Okay? This is an estimate at this point in time based on the percentage that we have in the elementaries at this point. Okay? So, the green over here in the subdivision and lot number, if it is green, that means that it is platted. That means that it is building infrastructure. Typically, you will not see a home, you will not see an elementary student. We did some educational assumptions. and based on other neighborhoods of like building, we're estimating that Kempton Creek, Woodsonia, and Logan Hubble, that would be 138, 38, and 205 elementary students to equal up to that 543. So there are subdivisions that do not have any homes, and we are making some assumptions based on the knowledge that we have in other neighborhoods. Bennington Elementary, no change in attendance center. Heritage Elementary, no change in attendance center. One of the things you'll note in Heritage Elementary is that in parentheses, the lots, based on homes, there really is only one subdivision that's not filled out, and that is Wood Valley West 2. And it is under construction now, and I believe will be filled in the next 18 months. So there's very little movement, 436 estimated, 457 to 460. We look at Pine Creek. At this point in time, this option, we are not suggesting any changes in the attendance center. But what you see is a tremendous amount of students coming out of Pine Creek subdivision alone. Almost 300 students. It is very close to being developed. And we look at Highland Hills, Summer Hill Farms. Those are the two that are still underdeveloped. And we're making some assumptions based on what their percentage is now. So as we look at it, we've got 593 students in Bennington, Pine Creek Elementary, and we estimate up to 692. Now keep in mind, 575 is capacity. We can always and have put students in other places like the computer lab, art, things of that nature, and move into that area. We have an alternate for Pine Creek and Anchor Point, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Anchor Point Elementary New has these subdivisions that we're recommending to the Board of Education in terms of attendance centers. Again, there are 3 that are platted or under construction in terms of infrastructure right now. That's Majestic Point East, Newport Street Townhomes. That's in or around Stone Creek, and then Lakeview 168. Lakeview 168, they are starting to put homes in that location right now. Again, some educational assumptions in terms of percentage. What you have is 234 students right now, and the assumption is it'll go to 506 with everything built out. Elementary number 5. Yes, we do not have a name for this at this point in time. We will have a name. It is in policy that we look at the subdivision itself and name the school after that subdivision. Celebrity is still working on that. We have offered names, okay? So D. Hoagie Elementary or Sean Hoppus, I mean, we can be bought in that regard, but that will have a name as we move forward. Okay? So elementary number 5 at this point in time, you can see a lot of green in terms of development for subdivisions. And thus, we have a lot of assumptions in terms of percentage. We are looking at basically some neighborhoods in the 34, 35 percentile, even though Stratford Park is at 56%. And we're looking at a subdivision that currently, if we took all the students today at Anchor Point, would be 350. If we build out and everything's built out with these assumptions, we're looking at 922. We've done some studies. We looked at 4 counties and the elementaries within those counties. The 3 that are closest to us are Douglas County, which we're in, Sarpy County to the south, and Washington County to the north. We took another larger one, Lancaster County. 211 elementaries. The size of an elementary ranges from 124 to 890. Okay? There is no elementary at 920. We're telling you that we need another elementary in this area. We are going out for another bond issue. That's a part of growing in Bennington Elementary schools. When that's going to happen, where that's going to be, I don't have an answer to that at this point in time. All right? But we start out with elementary number 5 at 350. A lot of these are platted, not under development, and some of these are starting in development. So we do not think that elementary number 5 will be over capacity in 2 to 3 years. It's going to take some time to get there. Right? We have an alternate as we look at Pine Creek and Anchor Point. You saw the numbers at Anchor Point a little bit low. You saw that already Pine Creek is a little bit high. So as we look at this, we have an alternate. The alternate is Highland Hills. Highland Hills, 166th Street. As you know, 168, 156, they're the two main streets. So 166, 2 to 3 blocks off of 168. We take it all the way from the north of Highland Hills to the south of Highland Hills. And we estimate that there's about 230 to 260, 260 going to the east, 230 coming to the west. If we were to make this, if the board was to approve this alternate, that does create a little more balance. What is 692 estimate drops to 628. What is 506 estimate goes up to 574. Okay? So that is an alternate that the board will have to decide one or the other. Keep that in mind. 166th Street to the west would go to Anchor Point. If we were to do that, we'll talk about transportation a little bit, but if we were to do that, policy says that a busy road means transportation. 168 is a busy road. We do not want pedestrians and students crossing 168. We do not want bicycles crossing 168. So, it would provide busing. Now, that's not an option right now for Pine Creek. It would be for middle school and high school students in that area. But Pine Creek, those students are close enough they would walk. Even though Anchor Point would be closer, if the board would approve this alternate, busing would be provided to those students because of that busy street. As we move to elementary boundaries, we're really looking at it with 3 attendance centers for elementary going to 1, 2 going to the other. So as we look at middle school south, number 2, we're looking at Anchor Point, Pine Creek, and elementary 5, minus Newport Vista. And why are we saying minus Newport Vista? Because Newport Vista is right across the street. There will be stoplights at Daniels and 168 to help with pedestrian and traffic coming across to elementary or middle school north or middle school number 1. So middle school north, middle school number 1 has 2 attendance centers. I can tell you when I look at a corridor, and this is the corridor, if you can envision it in your head, from 168th Street to 156th Street, 1 mile wide, from State Street down, from Bennington Road down to State Street, 2 miles long. That corridor is going to receive heavy pressure and development in the next 5 to 7 years. And why is that? Because there is a lake or a dam site just right across the hill behind me that is in play and will be developing soon. And as that recreational opportunity presents itself to developers, they are buying that land now. And so as we look at that, we have approximately 120 elementary students coming out of Hanover Falls. Those are the only students besides 1 or 2 acreages that have students right now in that 2 mile by 1 mile rectangle. It is projected, if it was 35% elementary, that would be over 800 elementary students. If it is 50%, that would be close to 1,200 elementary students, of which we only have 120 attending at this point in time. So we are, even though middle school, number one, middle school north, this middle school has less students today, we are trying to build it, looking at the future, and knowing what is coming in development that's not on paper at this point in time. Those are the section breakdowns. And this is important to note as we start talking about 5th grade transition and 8th grade transition, because those numbers are important. Keep in mind, in middle school, you have teams of 5. The breakdown, like in elementary, at 23, middle school is 25. 5 times 25, 125. So that 5-team group, 5 teachers, 4 teachers, 125 is that number that you're looking for. Each one of these is over there. So we start looking at short teams, okay? They're not made up of short teachers. They are just simply less than 5, okay? We have a team of 2 in 6th grade and 7th grade currently. And we would look at those 2 teams or short teams as we move into this. So yes, we're going to need more personnel, regardless of middle school 2 or middle school number 1. These are the percentages. Just like we showed you in the elementaries, there are percentages that we're using as projections for middle school. Now, why are they less? We're looking at 6 grades, K through 5 in the elementary, and 3 grades in the middle school. So naturally, 6 and 3, it should be half. It is not that, but those are the numbers in terms of percentages of neighborhoods as we move forward. Talk about transportation, whether it's elementary or middle school. This is the policy. And basically, this breaks down to just what I said. If there is a busy street, if it is not in that attendance center mile area, not located close, then transportation is provided at a cost. State law says if it's over 4 miles, it will be provided by the district for free. Very rare in Bennington that anything transportation-wise is over 4 miles. There are a few, but very rare that that occurs. Okay? Attendance center transfer, inside the district. Okay? Keep in mind, Bennington Public Schools has been closed for close to 2 decades for option enrollment. So this is, if you lived in attendance center 1 for an elementary and you wanted to go to attendance center 2. Again, rare that that occurs. There are educational reasons that we do look at that. But that's important to note as we start to look at the next slide, which talks about 5th and 8th grade transition. We have offered, if you are a 4th grade student today, and you're moving into the 5th grade next year, that we don't want to keep jumping you or moving you in terms of transition. So we have offered, if you're in 4th grade and you want to stay in the school, predominantly Anchor Point, then you have that option. However, if you're a family and you have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader, as an example, we would say that the 2nd grader moving into 3rd grade is going to the attendance center. But if a 4th grader moving into 5th grader wants to stay, you can do so. Transportation will be the priority of the family, not provided by the district. When we did so from 1 elementary to 2, Bennington Elementary to Pine Creek, the district said every 5th grader is staying. Okay? In fact, it wasn't 5th grade, it was actually 6th grade. We didn't have middle school at the time. When we moved from Pine Creek to Heritage, we gave that option. And when we did the same, Pine Creek basically to Anchor Point, we gave that option. Each time we gave the option, less and less transition, less and less stay. So, for example, Pine Creek to Anchor Point, I think we had less than a handful that picked up that option and stayed in that elementary. That's an option. 8th grade, we're recommending as administrators to the Board of Education not to allow that transition, not to allow that separation. And here's why. There are really kind of 3 areas down there: elective offerings, academic teaming, and activities. Okay, we'll go backwards and forwards. We're not really trying to build a super 8th grade basketball team, okay? So we're not transitioning and staying here because of activities. Academic teaming, we talked about. You know, personnel, it's best to have that team of 5, and that's what we move toward. So we're not trying to build short teams, long teams. We're trying to create those opportunities for kids. It is about the education of kids. And in particular, when you look at the multitude of elective offerings that we have in middle school, they compare very well. In fact, there are more offerings than most middle schools have in the metro area. In order to keep those offerings, you have to have numbers. And that involves personnel as well. So that's the reason the administration is making the recommendation. Boundaries are boundaries. 8th grade, 7th grader this year moves to that attendance center next year. This is somewhat the timeline that we're using. We have named the principals. If you haven't heard, Mr. Hoppus will be going to the south, and we do have a principal, and those will be announced for the north in the next month or 2. All right? We have selected 4 teams. That's a team of 5 to 8 teachers, and those leadership teams will start to plan for those schools. Certified staff, who's going there teacher to teacher, January and February. We notify everybody in the community when that is going to be by letter, and in April, support staff, and then we start moving into the building. One of the things I should note that's not up there is the Board of Education will receive this presentation at the November meeting, and the Board of Education will then vote to finalize boundaries at the December regular meeting. So that is the timeline as we move forward. Now, again, this is the portion for question and answer. For those that are out on streaming, you will not see the question and answer period. We will have a frequently asked question, and that will be posted as we move forward, probably in the next week. For those of you that are here, we'd be happy to take any questions that you have. And if it's okay, Mr. Eckman, I can take the microphone off. Is that okay? Trust me, I have a coach's voice, so you should be able to. All right?